Now here on BBC One, taking a look at this week's developments in the run-up to the election. Andrew Marr.
Good morning to you. There always comes a moment in a general election campaign when the party that's ahead has a major wobble. The polls tighten. Commentators get overexcited as voters home in on one particularly controversial issue, such as, for instance, how we treat pensioners. Welcome to the wobbly weekend. Here to defend a manifesto that has surprised and worried some traditional Tory voters, the Work and Pensions Secretary, Damian Green. And back with us again, the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, facing questions about Labour's plans for welfare cuts. Later on, they're going to be going head-to-head on the sofa. Plus, a question for its leader this morning. In the 2017 general election, what is the point of UKIP? And a reminder even now that there is more that unites us than divides us. Brendan Cox on his wife's legacy as we approach the anniversary of her death. And reviewing the news from the papers and beyond this morning, the Corbyn supporting commentator Paul Mason, Miranda Green from the Financial Times and the Daily Mail's Amanda Platel. But first, the news with Roger Johnson.
Andrew, thank you. Good morning. Donald Trump will today call on Muslims to present a united front in the fight against religious extremism. The US President is on the second day of a visit to Saudi Arabia, during which he signed an arms deal worth more than £80 billion. Later today, he will address the leaders of 50 Muslim-majority countries, describing the fight against terrorism as a battle between good and evil. Meanwhile, the New York Times is reporting that at least 18 CIA informants were killed or imprisoned in China after a spy network was dismantled. It's being described as one of the worst intelligence breaches in decades. The CIA has declined to comment. Here, the Labour Party is stepping up its drive for older voters, claiming Conservative manifesto proposals amount to an attack on the elderly. Jeremy Corbyn said that his party will protect the winter fuel allowance and the triple lock on state pensions, which will both be reduced under the Conservative manifesto. The Tories have accused Labour of running a scare campaign. Meanwhile, the leaders of the main parties have agreed to stop campaigning for an hour today to remember the MP Jo Cox, who was shot and stabbed in her constituency in West Yorkshire last year. Her husband, Brendan Cox, suggested the idea to encourage social unity and cohesion. Earlier this year, Mr Cox met the Duchess of Cornwall to launch a plan for a great get-together to commemorate the anniversary of Jo's killing next month. Pippa Middleton has tied the knot in a ceremony near her family home in Berkshire. The 33-year-old married James Matthews, a hedge fund manager at St Mark's Church in Englefield. The wedding was attended by celebrity friends and royals, including her sister, the Duchess of Cambridge, Prince George and Princess Charlotte. A happy day for all concerned. That's all from me. The next news here on BBC One is at 1 o'clock. Back to you, Andrew.
Many thanks. And the story of the front page is indeed two stories. It's Pippa and politics. Pippa, politics, Tory wobble on the front page of the Sunday Times. Auntie Pippa, politics, an interview in the Sunday Telegraph with Theresa May, in which her best idea, quite a good idea, is to focus the honours system on local heroes, ordinary people, rather than overpaid TV celebrities. Sunday Telegraph, Sunday Express rather, Pippa. Shh. Mail on Sunday, Pippa and politics, and Pippa, pages and pages of Pippa, he said, alliterating wildly inside. And then, oh, no, it's not Pippa, is it? No, in the Observer, and again, more politics on the school meals plan. So lots to talk about. Probably we'll talk more about politics than Pippa, I suspect. Amanda Platel.
I think so, Andrew. Well, you're quite right. It was a very wobbly weekend for Theresa May and the Tories. I think that Jeremy Corbyn, when he heard the manifesto, he must have just thought, Alleluia, there is a God, even though he doesn't believe in one. It's just incredible. There's now only a 9-point difference in the polls.
And that's the crucial figure on the Sunday Times.
In the Sunday Times, 44 to 35. And, you know, it's still a very respectable lead. It's not, you know, it's not going to make them be terribly worried, although obviously some candidates will. But I think the most important thing here really is, did she do this? Was this a mistake? Or was this intentional? Did she think, I can afford to lose some, I'm a really principled Prime Minister? I mean, who knows?
So do we agree, Miranda, that the essence of the problem is what she said about social care, pensioners and probably the winter fuel payments?
Well, I think the social care plan, certainly, and other sort of attacks on the elderly, as many of the papers have it today, were what, you know, yes, Prime Minister would have called a brave suggestion.
But it is brave in a sense. There is a really big
Absolutely.
national problem, and here is an answer to it. People may not like it, but it is a proper answer.
Absolutely, and I think there's also a genuine political reason for having such an ambitious and risky manifesto, which is, of course, even if they win big in the Commons, the Tories don't control the House of Lords. They have no majority. And the tradition is you don't block measures that are in a manifesto. So if you want to do very controversial things...
So this gives her much more power post-election. By taking a hit now, then she can have more power later on.
Yes, but I think she is taking a hit.
Yeah, fewer MPs, so that gives her less power.
And you know, there are very interesting quotes in that story about the poll on the Sunday Times saying we have to get the conversation off the manifesto. That's quite an interesting problem to have 3 weeks away from polling day.
Just before we move to Paul, the interview in the Telegraph, how much does that tell us, Miranda?
Well, I mean, no disrespect to the journalist when I say there's very little in it, because she is the absolute mistress of saying nothing in her interviews. But I think this is a good example of what the election campaign was supposed to be like. I mean, you know, the Linton-Crosby method for winning elections is to have one slogan, one idea, and stick to it. It's kind of no deviation, but lots of repetition. And she's back to that with her Sunday Telegraph interview. But unfortunately, the manifesto has disrupted the election.
Well, if the idea, Paul, is to move the story on from social care, it hasn't worked very well in terms of the front pages. You've got the Mail on Sunday, the dementia tax backlash.
Well, you know, Labour spin doctors on the day of the Tory manifesto were actually discussing, do you think the word dementia tax might play? It's there on the front page of the most Tory-supporting newspaper. Look, Theresa May stood up twice in Downing Street and said, this election is about Brexit and Brexit only, and to Labour voters in Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire, just lend me your votes on Brexit and everything else will be more or less the same. They wake up. I mean, every family in the land now wakes up worrying whether or not the asset wealth, the house price that's been assembled over generations for many working class families and middle class families, is now at a stroke, at risk, because Theresa May does what? She pulls out of nowhere a solution precisely opposite to the one recommended by the guy employed by the government to draw up one.
Except, Paul, if you're in a Labour constituency in the north of England in a house worth less than £100,000, there's a lot of people in that position, this is very good news for you because you don't have to pay a penny.
Well, absolutely. But the problem is, it's about universalism versus you're on your own. And the message that comes not just from this one, but from almost every policy the Tories presented in that manifesto was a reversal out of Cameronism, which, I mean, whatever you think about Cameron and Osborne, they did try to spread the load between the classes of paying for the big strategic problems like healthcare, like dementia, like elderly care. And this basically says to every family, you're on your own. And
no more pulling of the risk.
It's anti-universal, and it's a theme that I think is already provoking a backlash on the doorsteps. You know, on the doorsteps last Sunday when I was out campaigning, nobody wants to talk about Brexit already. They just want to talk about what's the future for me and my kids. I found that quite shocking, having been in this bubble for a while. But this Sunday, my goodness, we know what they're going to be talking about.
And what we have to remind ourselves, Miranda, is that the last election, not that long ago, 2015, the Conservatives were talking about the Dilnot proposal, which was a cap on social care of £72,000 and the rest of the risk pooled between everybody.
That's right, and now they're talking about completely the opposite, which is a sort of floor of 100,000, which is not very much if you're anywhere near the south of England, certainly. But I think if they stick to this policy, and it's questionable whether they'll be able to if they get rebellion from their own people as well inside the Tory party, is whether after the election they actually have to raise that 100,000 so much that it turns into a slightly different policy.
It's so complex. That's why it just was an open door to a label like the dementia, you know, the dementia tax. That's the problem.
It's a big...
And there's a lot of fear there.
It's a big problem three days away from polling.
Let's move, if we may, to the other side of the fence, to Jeremy Corbyn in the Daily Mirror. Just tell us about that, Amanda.
Well, it's quite interesting, because a lot of people are commenting on the fact that, that he may now be... he's much more aggressive, a full frontal personal attack on May. And And he's even saying here that, you know, taking away the winter fuel allowance, it could lead to deaths, and that Theresa May is just going to leave a lot of... She's just being nasty. What he's just... Basically, the message is...
Party.
It's now full on. She's still a nasty party.
And it's interesting because he's clearly a man, visibly doesn't enjoy running the Labour Party as a mechanism. He doesn't enjoy that kind of job. He loves campaigning. He's in his element. And it's interesting, Paul, around the country we're seeing lots and lots of examples of big enthusiastic crowds. You've seen some. They don't appear on the traditional media very much, though. We're going to show you one which is a Labour Party video, I have to warn people, from Tranmere Rovers. Here's Tranmere, and it's the Tranmere Rovers ground. It's a music festival, I think.
Thank you for giving me a few minutes. And remember, this election is about you, about what we can achieve together. Thank you very much.
Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, a bit surreal. The real question is, does that make any real difference in the end to the polls? There's get a lot of overexcitement this weekend, but actually, again, the polls are still suggesting a very, very large Tory majority, and a lot of people out there, not in Tranmere Rovers grounds, singing "Hello, Jeremy Corbyn," don't like him.
Well, look, many people who naturally have been feeling treated unfairly. Because British people are quite fair, you know. I mean, it's one of the things that defines us as a nation, that we don't like to see people bullied and kicked unfairly, which is what's been happening to Corbyn and the media. And I'm not surprised by that. I move in among people who would have been in that crowd.
Yeah.
But a lot of media people don't, and they will be, I hope, shocked to see that, because that was an unplanned meeting. Corbyn had just been on West Kirby Beach with a crowd that was so long that he couldn't see the back of it. Now, that doesn't win you an election. But what it does is it gives people on the doorstep the confidence to understand we are not a bunch of Al-Qaeda, IRA supporting threats to national security, as all these newspapers would have it. We are just the ordinary core of the British working population.
And there's a story in The Observer there about media bias, I see that.
Yeah, but you've got to remember that one of the papers that didn't even put his manifesto on its front page was the Daily Mirror. You know?
Yeah, I mean, look. I think the Daily Mirror has been quite. I know, absolutely. Look, this article in the Observer about media bias is a little bit of a sort of non-Damascene conversion from a newspaper that just does not like Jeremy Corbyn. It's not the bias that's the problem. When all the newspapers are owned by billionaires who avoid tax, they're going to be anti-Labour. It's the unfairness of the attack and the content of it that I think many people are now getting sick of.
Miranda, I think you've been looking at Simon Heffer in the Sunday Telegraph.
Yes,
on the
I have.
same
So, to stay on the Labour Party, Simon Heffer's written a column about some of these whisperings that Tony Blair, behind the scenes, might be gathering together money and supporters for something to happen after polling day. And it's this idea that the moderates within the Labour Party might still want to either split away or organise internally for any sort of leadership election that might come up. So it's a reminder that after polling day, the turmoil in the opposition is not going to end.
You could
so
argue
if anyone
that
thought we'd got time off.
Sorry. You could argue that politics generally gets more exciting on the day after polling than the run-up to polling. Though I shouldn't be saying that now. Keep watching, everybody.
Well, indeed, so that's a sign of it.
And that's partly because, of course, the Conservatives, if they win again, have a very, very difficult job immediately on negotiating Brexit. And there are two very different interviews in terms of tone in today's one interview, one column. David Davis, who is the Brexit Secretary, is giving a very tough interview to The Observer.
Yeah, he's just saying if they mess around with us, if they demand a huge 100 billion or more than that divorce bill, he's just getting up and walking out. And I love the picture of it. I mean, you know, that's... Look at it. He looks like he's ready for a fight. He's right down there.
You're not supposed to man-spread these days, though, are you? We should all avoid this.
That is a big man-spread.
Yeah.
So he's being extremely tough. But interestingly, there's a very different tone in an article by Boris Johnson in the Mail on Sunday, in which he attacks Jeremy Corbyn for being a blancmange, not his best metaphor, Boris. Interesting, but not your best one. But he also says, we want a very good deal with our European friends, we want a trade deal. He sounds much more emollient. And whether the government goes a bit more Boris or goes a bit more David Davis is the real unknown question of the general election.
I think this Bruce is going to win.
And also, interestingly, going back to our conversation about how the election's going, David Davis is trying to get them back on message as well, with all this Brexit is the defining issue, the thing they seem to have disastrously forgotten for the last few days. And if it is the defining issue for them, if they can get back onto that, it's much better for the Conservative Party.
And the words that we haven't mentioned so far are Liberal Democrat. What just happened to the great Lib Dem revival on the back of the 48% Remain vote? Everyone's saying it's going to be really their year, and so far they're low in the polls and falling. Tim Farron there in the Mail on Sunday, I think, are getting very fiery and angry.
Yes, well, I think it's become the most binary choice election for quite some time, and that means that what normally happens to the Lib Dems, which is a bit of a boost in coverage followed by a squeeze in the last days, all they're having at the moment is a squeeze, and they can't get into the conversation. And this decision to go wholly on Brexit hasn't worked well for them. So interestingly, this interview with Farron is following up on the great opportunity provided by the Tory manifesto, which is to start talking about domestic issues, and as May's uncaring, which plays into this, Paul's theory.
We think ahead on this programme. We've planned things very carefully ahead, and the reason we've asked Paul onto the sofa, of course, is to talk about the Pippa Middleton wedding, which we know enthused him more than anything else.
No, this is. I mean, it's 8 pages in the Sun, 8 pages in the Mail,
fantastic.
a lot in the Mirror. There's a young member of the royal family there with an outfit that every working class person in Britain will understand. See, when people talk about certain politicians taking us back to the past, this, I'm afraid, is it's Downton Abbey, isn't it? Replayed with real people.
But everyone likes Downton Abbey. That's the point.
I love this because it's just 8 pages of the kind of people who are going to be paying 50p on their tax when Labour get into power. And by the look of it, they can afford it.
All right, Amanda.
It's just incredible. I mean, she's the sister of a royal. She's not royal in herself. But I guess there's a tradition with this because Diana's brother sold he sold his wedding to Hello.
It's all about the pages.
I think he sold all 3 of his weddings to Hello.
Not the pages in the paper, but the pages in the tulle, the knickerbockers.
And it cheers people up. If everyone likes a wedding.
Cute kids.
I'm glad you're all cheered up. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now then, the husband of the murdered MP, Jo Cox, is urging politicians today to pause their election campaigning for an hour or so to remember her and to help bring communities together. And Brendan Cox joins me now. Welcome, Brendan. Now, first of all, what exactly do you want to happen today?
So what's happening today is politicians from all political parties are taking just an hour out of their campaigning to pause and to generally go and visit different community groups, whether that's the Women's Institute or whether that's the Rotary Club or the Scouts or the Guides, organisations who week in, week out spend their time bringing communities together. Obviously, election campaigns are necessarily divisive and they focus on the areas that we disagree with each other on. But the fact that all of the party leaders have responded to say, actually, we're going to pause just for a second and to say, of course, we disagree with each other fundamentally on lots of things, but actually there's more that unites us than divides us, I think is a really important signal.
And you've had a good response from all the party leaders?
Yeah, we've had an incredible response and, really beautiful events happening up in Batley, Joe's hometown. All of the candidates are getting together and doing something collectively. They're raising money at a local farm for a special baby unit. So it's those sorts of things which I think, politics is massively important. Elections are very important for our country. But we also have to get a better balance. We spend so much time talking about the things that we disagree with each other on, and particularly during elections, we're very bad at actually just pausing for a second and focusing on those things, those fundamental things that bind us together.
And after this event, after this moment, there's something else which you've talked about with Camilla and others, the Great Get-Together. What is the Great Get-Together?
So the Great Get-Together happens on the weekend of the anniversary of Joe's death, so the 16th, 17th and 18th of June. And it's a very basic idea, which is just asking people to get together with their neighbours, to share food with their neighbours and celebrate what we have in common. In thinking about how I marked the anniversary of Joe's death, I wanted it to reflect who she was, somebody with great sort of energy and enthusiasm for life. I didn't want it to be a sort of mournful, not just a mournful moment, but also it felt that Joe's killing, the person that did it, the political extremist that did it, was trying to divide communities, and I could think of no better response than the anniversary actually bringing communities together.
And you and the children are therefore going to have a very, very busy, and in some ways I would imagine slightly traumatic few weeks going through all of this process. How are you all coping?
Yeah, I mean, for us as a family, you know, this is something that goes on and on. It's not, you know, individual days can be worse and better. It's not just the big moments. But you know, the kids are here today, and they're incredibly excited about the great get-together. They love planning a party. They know that their mum would have loved it, and
they're going to get a great breakfast afterwards.
Yeah, they're very much looking forward to the breakfast. That's how we got them out of bed this morning. So
great. Well, listen, I think I'm still allowed, in terms of BBC impartiality, to say good luck with all of that. And Brendan Cox, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now then, the weather gods are angry about all this overheated nonsense being talked in the election campaign, and they have punished London and the south in particular with short blasts of icy rain. But if their intention was to cool us down, it hasn't worked. Philip Avery is in the weather studio with more.
Andrew, if this was an interview, I'd probably pick you up on the use of the word icy, but I know what you mean. It hasn't been just as warm as it might be. Although we are starting in a much better vein across the western side of the British Isles than we did yesterday. And even this rather duller picture from the borders of Scotland is an improvement on what we had yesterday. Overnight, we got rid of the showers, got rid of the persistent rain in the north of Scotland. New weather feature, just spreading some cloud and rain at the moment through Northern Ireland, eventually up into the western side of Scotland. Perhaps the thicker cloud in the east of Scotland producing the odd spot, but nothing to write home about, in a much improved situation on yesterday. But you can see on the bigger picture there that there's a lot of fine weather to be had. Top temperature on the day around about somewhere between London and Cambridge, 21, possibly a 22, but the sun is strong at this time of year. So just bear that in mind if you're spending some time out this afternoon. That could well burn you. No great problems with frost this evening or indeed overnight. We're importing these milder airs from the continent. Monday, another sparkling day for many, although a new weather front will just make its way through Northern Ireland into central and western parts of Scotland. But elsewhere, increasingly warm, I would have thought, and the temperatures at this stage could well be pushing towards 24, 25 degrees or so. And just a word to the wise, as we move on into the forthcoming week, this high pressure will deliver certainly stable, don't know about strong weather, but increasingly warm weather. And Andrew, I offer that prospect to the many, not the few.
Thank you very much. Whoever said you don't get good news on the television these days. Now then, it is weird, but the 2015 election now seems a lot longer than 2 years ago. Which party surprised the pundits and came third? Answer then UKIP. As I say, it seems a long time ago, and UKIP's current leader, Paul Nuttall, is with me. Paul Nuttall, simple question. Today, what is the point of UKIP?
Well, we're going into this election with clear water between ourselves and the other political parties. We're the only party which is committed to cutting foreign aid and putting that money into the NHS and social care. We're the only party which is truly committed to cutting immigration. And indeed, of course, we have to be the guard dogs of Brexit, because I fear once this election's over and Theresa May comes back with a whopping majority, that she will begin to backslide. And that's why it's important that UKIP is there to ensure that we get the Brexit that we voted for on June the 23rd.
Because, I mean, you clearly, as you know, had a terrible night on the local elections. You lost every but one of the council seats you were defending. Mm-hmm. You've got no MPs. You've got a few Welsh Assembly members left, and that's about it. You're down to 2% in one of the polls today, which is very, very low indeed. And the founder of your party, Alan Sked, has basically said you should wind it up.
Well, I'm sure Alan Sked would say that, because he seems to say it at every single election. We do have members of the London Assembly as well, and we still do have about 350 councillors right across the country. We knew that those local elections were always going to be the most difficult that we ever fought. They were made doubly difficult by the fact that Theresa May called the general election, so they were fought on national issues. But however, you know, UKIP has a great future, and I predict that after this election, UKIP could be bigger than it's ever been before. Because if she begins to backslide, and I think that she will barter away our fisheries, I think there will be a deal on freedom of movement, I think there will be a divorce bill. People did not vote for that last year.
OK, well, let's come to some of those issues directly. Let's talk about Brexit. You've said that you're going to hold her feet to the fire, you're going to be guard dogs. How can you possibly be guard dogs if you don't have many MPs?
Well, it doesn't really matter how many MPs that you have. Well, hang on. If you think back to 2013, we forced the then British Prime Minister, David Cameron, into offering a referendum. He never wanted to give, but we didn't have an MP at that time. What UKIP needs to do is it needs to be electorally viable, it needs to be going up in the polls, it needs to be doing well in local elections, and I predict that after this election, UKIP will go up substantially and we will do very well indeed.
You have said that you're going to get into double figures with MPs. Can you really look me in the eye and tell me that's going to happen?
Well, do you know what? I was in Thurrock yesterday, I was in Dagenham yesterday, I was in Clacton. Where we're strong, we're still strong. We're
Could
doing
win
very
there?
well.
Could win in those seats?
Do you know what? There's a good chance that I think we will. We're knocking on doors, we're out campaigning, the response is great.
You mentioned your immigration policy. This is, in effect, one in, one out. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's called balanced migration. It's something Frank Field has been calling for many years, Nicholas Soames. It basically boils down to the fact that we have a population problem in this country, and if we continue to allow a city the size of Newcastle upon Tyne in net every year, which is what we're doing every year at the moment, it's a Birmingham every 3 years, we'll have a population of 80 million by the middle of this century. It's unsustainable.
So that is a very, very dramatic change from the situation we're in now.
Well,
and it means a lot. I mean, at the time of the referendum campaign, I can remember Nigel Farage saying that this was good news for people from new Commonwealth countries. For instance, we're going to stop taking in the Europeans, and that'll be better news. Let me give you an example of why it wouldn't be. Under your policy, there's a Bangladeshi family, and they like family reunion. They've got aunties over there, and they want them to bring them here. Under your policy, that would be effectively impossible, wouldn't it?
Well, no, because what we would do is we would have an Australian points-based system. So if you've got the skills that we require, then yes, please come here and work on a visa, just as it is in Australia, just as it is in Canada, just as it is in the United States, because at the moment we cannot continue on the road that we're on. And the other political parties want to turn away. I mean, I'll give you an example. Do you know when I brought this up on the debate the other night? I mean, the Greens, the Lib Dems, Plaid, and indeed the SNP, they all laughed at me. They all want more immigration. We're the only party with a sensible policy to reduce the numbers.
Part of the reason they want more immigration is that they look at the condition of the British economy at the moment, and that it does rely on a lot of migrant labour coming into this country at the moment.
Yes.
Now, the Office of Budget Responsibility has calculated that if we cut immigration down to 185,000, so vastly more than you're suggesting, that would cost the Treasury £6 billion a year in lost revenue. How much will your policy cost the Treasury?
Well, hang on. At the moment, we're allowing in about 350,000 net. What we're saying is that we want to reduce that net figure to zero, so there'll still be people coming into the country. It's not as if we're going to put up the drawbridge in any way, shape or form, but what we're going to do is we're going to make... Hang on, let me finish. What we're going to do is this is going to be done over 5 years, so it leaves a lot of wriggle room. If we need people to come into the country, they can come in and they can work. But, you know, economics isn't everything. It's also about social cohesion. And at the moment, we have communities which have been tipped upside down over recent years because too many people are coming to the country too quickly and they're not learning English and they're not integrated.
What's your message to that Bangladeshi family I was mentioning who want family reunion? Is it actually you can have family reunion, but you're better off to go and do it in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, than to do it in London?
No, that will be tapered into our immigration policy, and we've got our manifesto launching on Wednesday, and all of this will be ironed out, and you can come back and interview me on that issue in a couple of weeks. But what I will say is that somebody has to get immigration under control, because at this present moment in time, we're allowing too many people to come into the country. As I say, there's been recent reports... There's been recent reports in recent years by Dame Louise Casey, by Trevor Phillips, which show that integration is actually getting worse in this country, not better, and that is down, in fact, to the amount of people that are coming.
Do you feel you've maybe taken over the leadership of UKIP at just the wrong time? It was like a great big party, and there was Nigel Farage, and everyone was in the bar knocking back the pints and all the rest of it. And then it's your turn. You go up to buy your round, and you turned back, and they've all scarpered. There's nobody left.
But, you know,
is that not how it feels?
No, do you know what? I am leading UKIP in a completely different time to Nigel Farage. Of course, when Nigel was leading, we had a Conservative Prime Minister who wanted Britain to remain in the European Union. Now we've got Theresa May talking the talk without having to walk the walk yet. I think things will be different when she does have to walk the walk, and that will start in September. But what I will say is that sometimes in politics,
Natalie, we have run out of time.
Comes out. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you very much indeed. All right then. The narrative in this election is that Theresa May is hyper-cautious and shies away from any risks. So it's odd then that the Conservative manifesto contains so much challenging news for one group, above all others, that actually votes, pensioners. And the Work and Pension Secretary, Damien Green, is with me now. Damien Green, welcome.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming in. Do you recognise this document?
I do.
Who produced it?
The Conservative Party.
And what does it contain?
It contains a very forensic dissection of the fact that the way...
Detailed costings, we could say.
The way Labour approaches any problem is to say there is a magic money tree. All we need to do, we don't need to reform anything, we don't need to change anything, we just need to take money off businesses and people, and that solves the problem. We know, because you and I remember the 1970s,
you'd agree,
that is what this would...
You would agree this is very detailed costing?
I would agree this exposes the Labour manifesto for being just a charade.
So here's another document. Why does this have no detailed costing at all? Why is this an uncosted document?
Because the difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party is that we produce realistic policies to deal with the real problems of this country, some of which raise money, or some of which spend. No, some of our pledges are to spend less money or to move money around so that it's spent in the right places. It's spent supporting people, not just saying, oh, well, the only solution to everything is more money and we're going to do that by taxing British business. That's, people... you were talking about this overexcited weekend we're having at the moment. I think this will focus people's minds on the fact that in less than a month's time, Jeremy Corbyn could be leading the Brexit negotiations, and given Labour's complete lack of credibility, nonsensical economic policy, as well as their other policies, nobody surely wants that.
So you mocked them for the money tree and all the rest of it. They have given us quite detailed accounts of how much tax they'd raise and from whom. You haven't. Let me talk, if I may, about the black holes in your manifesto. You say that you're going to spend another £8 billion on the National Health Service. Where is that money coming from?
That money is there. We see it because we
got this extra money.
We produced a budget a few months ago, so all the detailed costings for Conservative policies are already there.
This is extra money for the NHS. And I'm just asking you where it comes from. It can come from extra taxes, extra borrowing, or cuts somewhere else. So which of these is it?
A lot of it is retargeting money from within the system, because we know we can do things better. It's how we can promise more support for mental health, for instance. Well, from various parts of the NHS and the other parts of the public sector. For example, one of the things you've been talking about earlier, about social care.
On this programme last week said there was going to be an extra £1 billion for the armed forces in this manifesto. Where does that money come from?
I was about to give you an example of one of the things you were talking about earlier, where we are now going to target winter fuel payments on those who really need them, and that money, the money that we save from that, can be targeted to the health and social care system. That seems to us a sensible way of dealing with one of the big issues facing the country.
How much money are you going to raise from cutting winter fuel payments?
Well, it depends where we set the level.
No,
we said we'd consult on that. We know it
roughly
costs about £2 billion.
Most of that £2 billion?
We'll see, because we haven't, as you know, set the level
exactly.
Of
it is an uncosted black hole document.
It's not uncosted because we haven't said we are going to spend X billion extra on health. We are saying that the money we save on the winter fuel payments going to Mick Jagger and Bernie Ecclestone and indeed John McDonnell, that would be better spent on the social care system, which needs more money. Everyone agrees that.
Lots of people watching this programme are not Mick Jagger, or indeed very, very wealthy. They are pensioners wondering at what level they're going to lose their winter fuel payments.
Well, that's why we said in the manifesto...
And they're very concerned. And you're not going to tell them.
We will consult so that everyone who is in genuine need of the winter fuel payment will still get it. But we think the money that's currently being spent on people who need it less, many of whom have come up and said to me over the years, really, should I be getting this? That money is better spent in a social care system that we all agree is one of the great challenges facing our country. The difference between our document and the Labour document is that we actually deal with the big challenges facing this country. Theirs is just a wish list.
Can I put it to you, the difference between the two documents is that you have got teams of clever people trawling through the Labour Party promises and costing every single one of them and telling people what it might cost and where it's going to come from. And your document, those clever people are saying nothing to pensioners watching this programme who need to know before voting day whether they're going to lose their winter fuel payments or not. Do they not deserve that information?
They will know that if they are in genuine need of the winter fuel payment, they will still get that. We are going to set that at a level.
What does genuine need mean?
What you said, well, that's what we're going to consult on after the election, because that's the sensible way to do it. That's the way a grown-up government will operate. We'll say, here's a manifesto, here's our broad proposal, a proposal which causes interest among commentators.
It's not commentators who are interested about this. This is pensioners watching this programme, wondering, if I vote Conservative, on June the 8th. Does that mean that on June the 15th I lose my winter fuel payment, yes or no?
Well,
lots of them need to know that.
Well,
it's not commentators.
and they will be able to contribute to the consultation. But they will know, those pensioners will know that we have massively reduced pensioner poverty. One of the proudest things that successive governments have done is that in the 70s and 80s, pensioner poverty was 40% of pensioners. We've now got that down to 14%. I'm really proud that we've introduced the auto-enrolment system that means that 7 million more people are now saving for a pension, so that we'll be able to provide more security and dignity in old age for more people. Through the generations, we're looking ahead. We're not just looking at the election. We're thinking long-term about the big challenges.
We have somehow slipped sideways away from winter fuel payments. Can I put it to you that you start by cutting this, you're going to take it away from virtually everybody. And the reason you're going to take it away from virtually everybody is you need that money. And one David Cameron said at the time of the last election, you could, he's talking about the then Labour policy to take winter fuel payments away only from the top 5% by restricting these benefits aggressively or abolishing them altogether is the only way you make big savings. And he went on, once they have started chipping away at these benefits, believe me, before long, they'll start getting rid of them altogether. And we'll be back where we were, the people who have worked hard all their lives being written off and forgotten about.
Well, we've identified social care as one of the big issues that both old people obviously care about, but also their children, younger generations as well. And we think that restricting winter fuel payment to those who genuinely need it, and you know,
whoever they may be.
We as a country will decide what that is in a proper consultation, which is the way government should operate. But actually, releasing
You'll
that
decide,
money,
but you won't tell people now.
Releasing that money for use in the social care system is absolutely a good way forward to start improving our social care system, which is vital for so many people. At the same time as allowing them to keep their home, allowing them to know they can pass on £100,000 to their children.
You've mentioned social care a lot, so let's turn to social care. Can you remind those people watching what the Conservative policy was in 2015 on social care? How is it going to be paid for?
The social care policy was, broadly speaking, to continue what's happened before. And the
there was
reason,
a cap, wasn't there?
Well, it was the Dilnot proposals.
And the cap was?
What the cap? Well, the amount people could save was 23,000. That was.
And what was the cap on how much?
The cap was going to be about 72,000. I think there was still discussion.
Exactly, and that was the policy.
But the policy as it is, I think. It needs to be changed for two reasons. First of all, we know that there are going to be 2 million more over 75s in 10 years' time, which is great. We're all living longer.
You knew that in 2015, yes. But you have broken that promise.
Well, let's talk about the 2017 manifesto, shall we? We haven't broken that promise, because what we've done is devised a better system. The idea that the only thing people could pass on was 23,000 has now been replaced with our idea in the manifesto that they'll be able to pass on 100,000. That's 4 times as good.
It is, except the crucial difference is that the value of their house, if they have been cared for at home, is now taken into account as an asset. Now, taking a constituency at random, let's think of Ashford in Kent, where the average value of a house is £240,000. If there is a widow, a Mrs. Smith, living in an average house in Ashford, under the new policy, how much extra might she have to pay?
Well, she won't have to. If she's living on her own, then she will be able to stay in her house throughout her lifetime. If she's not a widow, if she's married, her spouse will be able to stay in their house for their lifetime as well. So
if she's a widow, there isn't a spouse.
I'm extending it. There will be other people
just suggesting,
who are
so she's got dementia, poor woman, and she's being looked after in her own home in Ashford, an average-priced home in Ashford. How much extra is she going to have to pay under your policy?
Well, she won't be paying anything until not while she's
her estate will be.
Yeah, well, exactly. So she won't be paying anything. She doesn't. She can stay at home if she is able to be cared for at home. Then, quite rightly, she will be able to stay there.
How much extra does the estate have to pay?
Well, it will depend on what the other costs are. But what her children can know, or whoever she wants to leave money to, is that whereas before...
You will have guessed that I have the answer for you, which is that she's going to pay an extra £70,000, twice what she would have been paying under the previous policy. Why should she possibly vote Conservative?
I suspect that figure requires some heroic assumptions.
It doesn't.
She should vote Conservative, and her children should vote Conservative, because they will know that whatever level of care she needs, so this removes that terrible decision of how long should you try and keep someone at home or maybe put them into residential care, which is a real decision that many families have struggled with. That decision needn't be influenced by financial considerations anymore. Everyone can be confident that they will be able to hand on
money from the state in due course.
Precisely not, because
let me ask you.
Let them inherit £100,000 as opposed to the £23,000 that was there before. That's a much better system. It's a much fairer system.
Let us talk then about inheritance and cascading the wealth through generations, and take a different example, this time Twickenham, which is a seat where Vince Cable for the Liberal Democrats is fighting you very, very hard. An average house there costs £545,000. And if we take a couple, the chap's got an early onset dementia, he's been cared for in his home. And they've got a little bit of money in the bank, but not much. Under your proposals, they could lose virtually everything. Their children and their grandchildren who are hoping to inherit some of that wealth won't be able to.
Well, when you say virtually everything...
Well, it was going to be 500, it's now 100.
£100,000 is...
Among five children.
Is a reasonable inheritance to have, and people who are lucky enough to have had great rises in property value will still, I think, decide that £100,000 is a better way of doing it. But this has got to be put in the context of funding the social care system.
Of course, I understand there is a problem, but I'm just asking you about your answers to it.
Well, our answers to that problem mean that more money goes into the social care system. Everyone knows that there will be a decent inheritance for them. Nobody will have to lose their home during their lifetime or the lifetime of their surviving spouse. This is a much fairer system, and it's a much more sustainable system.
Used to believe in inheritance. This is a vast, secret inheritance tax.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. You're a member of the Bow Group. You're a member of the Bow Group. Yes, you've written stuff for the Bow Group for many years.
A long time ago. I haven't been to the Bow Group a long time.
You're a kind of Bow Group guy.
No, I'm not. You don't know the Bow Group now. The Bow Group has gone off on a journey.
The Bow Group says this is the biggest stealth tax in history.
And the Bow Group is wrong. We are saying that everyone can inherit £100,000, regardless of the costs that the state and therefore the taxpayer has paid for them. One of the big issues that's facing this country is intergenerational fairness. So this system is fair to older people. Let me finish this one. You've also got to be fair to people working now and paying taxes. That is the only other way to pay for the care system. So this system we are proposing is fair both to pensioners, and particularly that minority of pensioners that may need long-term care, but also to working taxpayers. And that's the question you want to ask John McDonnell.
Okay.
How can he justify...
I'll ask you the questions I want to ask him. Life is unfair generally. It's very unfair that some people get dementia and some people don't. Under the original Dillnot system, we pooled the risk in society after a certain threshold and spread out the unfairness. If you are very unlucky and you get a terrible disease that means that you're being looked after at home, maybe a stroke where you don't return to work or whatever it might be, you're being looked after at home, then the rest of society will come in and help. You don't have to pay again. Under the new proposals, you are basically on your own for most of it. Here is what Sir Andrew Dillnot himself has said. People will be left helpless, knowing that if they are unlucky enough to suffer the need for care, they will be entirely on their own until they're down to the last £100,000 of all their wealth, including their house. And he was right last time and he's right now.
No, there are two problems with what Andrew Dillnot proposed, and it was a serious set of proposals. One is that the social insurance he proposed as a way of doing it, there are no products there for it. That market doesn't exist. And the other, of course, is that his problem of, as it were, setting a cap rather than a floor meant that the distribution of the benefits became wildly uneven. We are a party that Theresa May wants a country that works for everyone. So it's got to work for people, not just in Ashford, though clearly I care about them, and Twickenham, but also in Hartlepool and in North Wales and in Scotland and so on. And so allowing everyone to know that there is this flat figure of £100,000 is fair to everyone.
Very briefly, in Ashford and Twickenham and Scotland, lots of other places, people hate this policy and it makes them very, very nervous indeed. Is there any chance at all you're going to look at it again?
No. But what we said in the manifesto, incidentally, just to put that no in context, is that we have set out this policy, which we're not going to look at again. There will be a green paper covering both social care and health coming out in the summer, because we all know that the long-term solution to the social care crisis is better integration of the NHS and social care. That's the aim of our policy. This is the first step along that road.
I know you're coming back to discuss this more later in the programme, but for now, Damien Green, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, coming up later this morning, the Sunday Politics with Andrew Neil. He'll be speaking to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Gauke, and taking a close look at the state of the polls. That's at 11 o'clock here on BBC One. I'm joined now by the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell. Mr McDonnell, welcome. Now, you'll have heard all of that. I'm just going to ask you very straightforwardly.
Before we start, can I just pay tribute to Jo Cox's husband, Brendan? I thought that was extremely moving, but extremely courageous as well, what he's done.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Can I ask you, we were talking about social care there. Yes. What is the Labour policy for funding social care?
Right. Immediately, we've promised to put in £8 billion over the lifetime of Parliament to plug the gap that the Conservatives have created. Remember, part of this crisis isn't just about an ageing population. Excuse me, it's also about the 4.6 billion that's been cut by the Conservatives from social care since 2010. What we're suggesting is that we need to get back to the Dilnot proposals.
Including a cap?
Yes, let's be clear. What he recommended was a cap, which I agree, because that gives the certainty to people about how much they will pay. Secondly,
and a cap of about how much?
Well, if you remember, the recommendation that was coming out of David Cameron's was about 72,000 by 2020.
And you'd stick with around that, would you?
I think so, but the issue here is that it's the point you made about the lottery, what condition will you get. The reason some people are calling this, unfortunately, a dementia tax is because you don't know what condition you'll suffer from. And if it is a more serious one like dementia, and I tell you, I've been through this in my family, I know what it's like. What happens is that the burden falls upon you. Dilnot's proposals was also to have a threshold as well, so there'd be enough for your children to inherit if you had those assets. But he said this basic principle, which is the NHS principle, you pool the risk. And in that way, people are not left, as he said, on their own.
Well, I gave Damien Green some examples. I'll give you an example as well. Let's think of a couple living in Burnley, a constituency which is marginal and being strongly fought over at the moment. Yeah. And the average house there could be worth less than £100,000. Yeah. And for people who need social care at home in Burnley, in a Labour heartland seat, this is great news. It means they will not have to pay a penny. It gives them the security.
OK. Funnily enough, my daughters live up near Burnley, and property prices are increasing there just as they are right the way around the country.
I'm glad to hear it for Burnley.
What we want to do is make sure, just like the NHS, there's a pooled risk so everybody is certain. You know, that concept of we're all in this together, I think is the right one to apply to health as well as it is to social care itself. In that way, that's why, let me just finish, Andrew, that's why we supported Dilnot, but we also supported a cross-party approach, because we've got to have something that's sustainable over generations. So that's why we've said to the Conservative Party, pull this now, let's go back to that cross-party approach that actually Andrew Dilnot was proposing. And I just feel we've all been let down as a result of what's come in this Tory manifesto.
Let me ask about your own manifesto and some unanswered questions in your own manifesto. Okay. Are you going to end the freeze on welfare benefits?
Right, what we're doing is we're putting £30 billion in over the lifetime of the Parliament into welfare. We're reforming the whole process, universal credits, and the implication of that will be, the impact of that will be basically the freeze. The impact of these proposals will make the freeze irrelevant because we'll reform the whole process. What I've said about when the freeze was introduced.
I'm just interested that when I say, are you going to end the freeze on benefits, you can't simply say yes.
Well, in effect, we will be doing as part of the overall reform package that we're putting forward, which includes the introduction of a real living wage as well, which includes the reform of universal credits and a whole range of other aspects, including scrapping the bedroom tax, sanctions, etc.
What about child tax credits? Right. Are you going to restore child tax credits?
What we're doing is an overall comprehensive reform. Look, I'm saying...
You should be able to say yes.
Well,
you said you were going to swim through vomit
and listen,
to vote against this.
I tell you, people know how strongly I feel on this, and Jeremy Corbyn. That's why I use that expression. That's why in my first budget, the reforms that we'll bring forward will make sure people are not just protected, but the system will be reformed to benefit them.
If you're angry about it, you could reverse it. The Resolution Foundation, on which the Labour Party has rested quite heavily, says that 78% of Conservative cuts under your proposals will not be reversed.
Okay.
I
do not accept that. I think the proposals that we'll be putting forward on reform, as we've set out already, will ensure that, in effect, we will be addressing this issue of how we reverse the benefit freeze itself. I want to do it as part of an overall reform package and not just pick off one by one. The issue, look, I tell you, I feel so strongly on this. We will deliver this in the first budget.
It would cost you £8 billion to do the things that I've suggested. Socialism, as the man said, is the language of priorities. And your priorities as a government seem to be directed more towards middle-class families, because you found £11 billion to reverse the university charges. And that, as you know, mainly the university fees mainly go to middle-class families. Well, why can't you find that kind of money for people on benefits?
We are putting £30 billion in benefit changes to make sure we tackle the real issues and reform the whole system. So £30 billion is going in. But remember, this issue, I know what people are saying about the issue around tuition fees, but we've just seen for the first time, because the Tories increasing tuition fees from £3,000 to £9,000, we've just seen state children, the percentage of state children declining. So it is becoming a disincentive for our youngsters to stay on. And that affects, well, aspiring working class families.
OK, well, let's look at another aspect of the manifesto, which we can't disagree about because it's true: higher taxes and higher debt. Now, you have said that you're going to borrow, roughly speaking, £25 billion a year for 10 years to £250 billion, a huge amount of money. But you've also said that you're going to nationalise privatised industries without telling us how much that's going to cost. And at the end of all of this, you're going to have less debt than before. Do you mean less debt in real terms?
It's in relationship to trend GDP.
So it's a smaller percentage, it's not a smaller figure.
As the economy grows. So that's the way in which basically economists and others, the markets value our economy.
So all of that, sorry.
OK, let me take you through it, shall I?
No, well, I just want to jump in a little bit. All of that, because that all depends. To get those numbers to work, that all depends on a certain rate of growth of the economy. Otherwise, it's kind of meaningless. So what is the rate of growth that you're looking for?
Right, let me just take you through bit by bit, because we need to unpick that. Can I start off with the basic proposal as well? We published this. No other political party, well, certainly the Conservatives haven't. The Conservatives published their manifesto. You picked Damien up on this one. Others, IFS, other independent organisations, have costed the additional funding that's needed for the Tory manifesto is £40 billion. I don't think there's a pound sign in their manifesto at all. No, a completely uncosted proposal. So I'll come on. So I just want to contrast.
He had to go at you. You're having a go at him. Fair dues. I want to come on to your own borrowing.
OK, we published this on the basis of every policy would be costing a funding source. On borrowing, on the £25 billion, basically, you know as well as I do, the OBR multiplier is 1. That means for every pound you invest, you get at least £1 back. That will cover our borrowing as we go forward. The £25 billion a year, how have I arrived at that figure? It is from the CBI saying we need £500 billion investment over a 10-year period.
It's less that figure than the figure of economic growth that you require as a Labour government to fund your own plans.
The OBR analysis is basically for every pound you invest, you get £1 back, so it'll cover the borrowing itself.
Can you give us a number in terms of the economic growth that you need to cover your plans?
Well, it is matched. It is cost neutral. It is cost neutral. The growth figure...
But it can't be cost neutral if the economy isn't growing.
Well, what I'm saying is the OBR is saying very clearly their multiplier ratio is 1. So in other words...
So 1% growth is your figure?
Well, yes, for every 1% you grow, for every 1% investment, you get 1% back. But the whole point of this is that I put forward a programme which is completely cost neutral on the nationalised industries.
I think we're not getting anywhere here.
No, I'm trying to say to you...
So what is the cost of nationalising the privatised industries?
Our capital programme, I'm saying, is cost neutral because for everything you put in, you get the money back. Not me saying this, it's the Office of Budget Responsibility. On the nationalised industries, what we do is we'll issue, bonds for shares. That means we get an asset in return, and again, that becomes cost neutral.
All right.
In terms of any costs involved whatsoever, remember, for investment, etc., we'll be getting the income from those nationalised industries, and that will cover the ability to reduce charges on the customers, but at the same time that will cover any costs incurred of investment that we need.
I just put it to you, this depends on economic growth.
Yeah.
And on the other side, apart from the top 5% that you're going for in terms of income tax and so forth, there's a whole raft of business taxes in there. Higher corporation tax, the so-called Robin Hood tax.
And that goes straight into...
a tax on companies who spend more than £330,000 on a salary. All of those things. Now, they may make sense individually.
Yeah.
But at a time when this country is on the edge of leaving the EU and lots of companies and lots of individuals are thinking, shall I stay in Britain or shall I go somewhere else? This could have the effect of driving away the very same people that
Andrew,
you need in this country.
Quite the reverse, because what we do in terms of our spending policies is exactly what businesses are asking for us for. Long-term, patient, stable investment.
They're not asking for higher corporation
tax. No, but they're not. But
actually
what we are doing is giving them the opportunity to invest in this country alongside government. That's why we're setting up a National Investment Bank. And again, all of this is fully costed based upon the principles of actually what the others are. And can I just quote one?
Very, very quickly.
Okay, very quickly.
We're out of time.
Who told us now's the time to invest? Because interest rates are virtually near zero? Philip Hammond only a couple of months ago. Pity he couldn't deliver in his own
Who knows
project.
whether Philip Hammond will be there for a very long time.
Well,
anyway,
he will not be there.
You've been discussing Damien Green via me. You'll be able to talk directly in just a second. But for now, let's have a look at what's coming up straight after this programme.
Join us at 10 from Salford, where we'll be debating just one very big question. Will globalisation make the world a better place? We've assembled eminent economists, pioneering environmentalists, seasoned commentators and campaigners against exploiting the world's poor to debate perhaps the biggest question facing all of us. See you at 10 on BBC One.
Very interesting, and Damien Green and John McDonnell are both back here. Just before we got going, Damien, John just mentioned Philip Hammond, the Chancellor. There's a lot of talk that you are being lined up for his job immediately after the election. Have you had any conversations with anybody about this?
No.
Would you be prepared to do it? Are you qualified to do it?
Philip Hammond is doing a great job as Chancellor, and I'm sure will continue to do so after the election, not least because of what we just... Sorry, can I just address something that John said, where he said, we're not going to borrow anything, we're going to issue bonds. That's how governments borrow money. It is absurd to say that you can take over the rail industry.
It's covered. You issue
still
the bond.
have to borrow the money,
wait
though.
For me.
You still have to borrow the money.
You issue bonds for shares. The income from profitable assets then covers the cost. Simple as that. And it's been done by government after government, effectively.
That's the gilts market.
Okay.
But
exactly.
it's borrowing.
You're
borrowing is 25 billion
is covered.
Plus
no, don't
40
make this
billion
up.
for the
Do
national
not make this
I'm
up.
not making up. You don't appear to know what government borrowing is.
That is covered by the income from those assets, isn't it?
If I take a mortgage on my house, I borrow a huge sum of money and
but
pay
these
it back
are
out of my
operational
income.
companies.
I've still borrowed the money.
These are operational companies that have profits, so those profits will cover any cost of that borrowing.
That's what pays off my mortgage.
Well,
you're saying it's not borrowing.
I'm still interested. I'm still really interested in what you both think the economy needs to grow by, because John McDonnell was saying that your manifesto has got £40 billion of extra spending hidden inside it. That needs to come from somewhere. You've got huge spending commitments. That needs to come from somewhere. This needs to come from the economy growing. So how much does the economy have to
What we're saying, for every level of investment we put in, we get an exact return to that amount, if not more. So it does balance out, so these become cost neutral. The issue for this man, look, we've funded it. In their manifesto, not a single pound. Sorry, now it might be.
Except you haven't funded a single penny of buying the national grid, the rail industry, the water industry, half the energy industry.
Sorry, this is fatuous economic talk from you.
You don't understand
what happens is that you borrow the money from an asset.
Exactly.
And
you borrow the money,
profitable
and that
asset
adds
covers
to your
the cost.
borrowing total.
Look, what you're doing in the water industry, you're an associate director of a company in the water industry, weren't you, whilst you were an MP?
Ago,
Yes, you were, and you made quite a profit out of it. £18 billion worth of profits paid out to shareholders during your period when they were there. And we're going to take that money, instead of using it for dividends for shareholders, rich people like you, we're going to ensure it covers the cost.
No, the money to do it.
No, we will use, instead of giving it out in dividends, we will use it to cut costs at the same time.
You don't understand capitalism.
Oh, dear me. Well, you certainly do, don't you? Because you are one of those people who made a fortune out of water.
If this goes on much longer. Can I ask one thing, however, about the Conservative plans, because what you haven't done is been very clear about what's going to happen to taxes if you're re-elected. Is the truth not that actually you're going to have to put taxes up too?
40 billion means £1,000 on tax.
We will
on the average
obviously judge taxes. We've said we're not going to increase
fund
VAT.
40 billion then?
But we can fund a lot of things because the economy will grow faster under a Conservative government. Because we won't be clobbering business with the extra taxes.
40 billion means £1,000
business will keep growing, even though you're going to tax the hell out of it.
The three people still watching are about to turn off. We have run out of time, but thank you very much indeed. Thanks to all my guests this week. Next week, I'm going to be joined by, among other, the Green Party's Caroline Lucas and Plaid Cymru's Leanne Wood. No Natalie's at all, as far as I know, but bye-bye for now. Thank you very much.
Will globalisation make the world a better place? That's this morning's big question. Next.